want to talk about what the United States left behind in Afghanistan. We know the United States left behind all kinds of weaponry. We know that the Biden administration left behind American citizens. We know that we left with the Taliban, actually gave it to them, a list of Americans who were in Afghanistan, also of Afghan allies. Supposedly the purpose of this was for the Taliban, think of this, the Taliban to help these people get out. Although it is obviously quite possible, if not in the interest of the Taliban, for them not to get out, so the Taliban can make them hostages, hold them up for ransom, or just simply kill them. Now, the MIT Technology Review has an important article. This is a somewhat obscure source, but a reliable one that monitors technology, that points out something I haven't seen elsewhere in the media. And that is that the United States left behind in Afghanistan what the MIT Review calls biometric databases on the Afghan population, but specifically focusing on all the people that the United States worked with. And I'm not just talking about translators, I'm talking about the little girls who came to schools that were set up by America, the Afghans that did business with Americans. So the wide network of Afghans who had anything to do with the United States. Now, the people who ran this war in Afghanistan were really into, data. They were really into, they like to talk in the language of, we have a lot of data points. And so they probably thought they were being extremely clever. And there were some real problems they were dealing with. I mentioned earlier on the podcast the problem of Afghans with fake identities. Oh, I'm a soldier in the Afghan army. Is my name not on the list? Oh, yeah, but I still need a paycheck. or these so-called ghost soldiers, where an Afghan chieftain goes, I've got 800 people from me fighting against the Taliban. In fact, he's got like 30, but he's collecting paychecks for all the 800. So the Americans were onto this, and they thought, some Ivy League grads probably figured, well, let's compile an electronic database of all the Afghans. And so they came up with this very detailed database. It apparently has 40 pieces of data per person. Now, for the people that the U.S. dealt with directly, it includes things like facial images, iris scans of your eyes, fingerprints, and all of this is then assembled on computers. And the databases get very, very elaborate. In fact, they talk about, they ask you your name, date and place of birth, if you have any kind of Afghan ID number. But then it also asks you what's called relational data. What's the name of your father? What's the name of your grandfather? Who are your relatives? Can you name 2 tribal elders in your community who might be able to vouch for you? So this is not just individual data. It's almost a sort of genealogy. It's a family tree. It establishes what you can call a network of connections. Now think about the value of this to the Taliban. I mean, I understand the value of it to America, which is that you can now make sure that the guy is who he says he is. You can try to make sure that you're paying a guy who actually exists. But if you're going to be careful to collect all this data, you cannot be irresponsible and leave it for the other side. And that appears to be exactly what we did. The data is so detailed that it even asks people things like, what's your favorite fruit and vegetable? So we're drilling down into who these people are. And of course, all of this can be done in a country that has no data privacy laws. Apparently, by the way, a little detail, the only missing item of data in this database is, what's your mother's name? Because apparently in Afghanistan, people do not like to reveal their mother's name. And so, aware of this, this is the one item of data. But think about it. If this falls into the hands of the Taliban, and it has, the Taliban can now use these databases because they essentially know who all their rivals are. They know all the people who did business with them, with the Americans in any way. That Amnesty International is talking about the Taliban going door to door to torment people. There have been summary executions. There's been what's called headhunting going on in Afghanistan. So all of this shows, and here's a quotation from a guy named Abdul Habib. He's a former soldier in the Afghan army. And he says, what's so obvious? He goes, if they are making such a system, they should also have thought of securing it. Duh. Apparently, these geniuses, these sort of Ivy League types who were running this war, decided to use Google spreadsheets, very simple forms of assembling this data, and in the haste to get out, they just left it behind. Again, this is bungling, but it's bungling on such a high order that you almost have to ask that when intelligent people, we're not talking here, Biden didn't make these decisions, they were made by people who are not senile, who have their heads on, who probably were well educated. When educated people make decisions that are this bad, that are this crazy, you almost have to ask if there is some kind of malign design behind it.